Hi. In 1989, I was a junior in college. Let's see if this thing works here. There was a little delay. And I just made a big decision. I had started college majoring in electrical engineering, even though I loved mathematics. But people would tease me, like, what are you going to do with a math major? What kind of job are you going to get? Are you going to get a job where you just count things? So I was like, okay, I'll be practical. I'll get an electrical engineering degree. But it wasn't working for me, and I just felt like a number in there. So I switched over to mathematics, and I wasn't sure if it was the right decision. And then I had this lecture from George Andrews, who was from the University of Pennsylvania. He graduated from Oregon State, and he came and he gave a talk on Ramanujan's Lost Notebook. Now, Ramanujan is a famous Indian mathematician who's basically self-trained. He didn't have any teachers. He just read a lot of books and learned some amazing mathematics and did some cool stuff. George Andrews had been at Trinity College in England and just looking through some boxes of books and found this notebook that Ramanujan had written that no one knew about. So he was giving a talk. And here's a little more on Ramanujan. So Ramanujan in 1913, he was doing amazing mathematics, and he would send letters to professors in England saying, here's some really cool stuff I'm doing, I'd love to come work with you. And he wasn't really big on showing proofs. Like, his big thing was to do something amazing on the left-hand side of an equation and then something else amazing on the right-hand side, but not really, they would equal each other, but you had no idea how he got it. So anyway, one professor, G.H. Hardy, realized that he was doing incredible stuff and had him come to England and started working with him. Now, the cool thing of the lecture that George Andrews was giving was that since a lot of the equations, no one knew how they were derived or if they worked, his idea was to take some of the equations and pose them as puzzles in this magazine called Games Magazine, which basically was, it wasn't hugely popular. I had a subscription, but that says nothing. But basically, each month they had different puzzles and contests, and you could send in a submission and win a t-shirt. And there were just tons of different puzzle solvers who loved this magazine. So his idea was, let's take these math formulas that none of these mathematicians can figure out and write them as a puzzle and see if anyone has any ideas. So that was, in 1989, that was the first time I'd heard about the idea of crowdsourcing. And I thought, wow, that's a really cool idea. Let's cheat off everyone at the same time. The other great thing about George Andrews, I was in the math department, and so I got to go to some lunch with him and some other staff, and I just talked to him about some math I was doing. And a month later, he sent me a packet. This is before the World Wide Web. This is like before, like if you wanted to find a journal article, you had to go to the library and hope that your library had that journal. And he sent me this packet of like 12 papers and a handwritten note of like, oh, I think this is really interesting what you're doing. I was just like, it was crazy. It was one of the most awesome things I've ever had because I get choked up talking about it now. But it just made me feel like I was a peer, that I was actually a mathematician, that I'd made the right decision of switching my engineering major, even though I would just be hired to count things like jelly beans. So if you ever get a chance and someone sends you stuff, always reply back because it's really cool. And it validated me. And the reason I'm actually doing this talk is a year ago today is when I came across the papers he had sent me in a box, and I remembered it, and I sent him an email and said, oh my God, that was so great what you did. And he started corresponding back and forth with me, even though he has much better things to do. So anyway, crowdsourcing. So there's a lot of long definitions, but basically, I can't even remember what the definition is. It'll be written behind my head here. But what I'm not going to talk about is there's some main examples like Wikipedia. Everyone does entries and makes changes. Open source, Linux. Linux is a crowdsourced language, and it has no licenses, and it's really cheap, and it's what Amazon and Twitter, all those servers use that language to run on it. Kickstarter. John Bittner is going to give an excellent talk about crowdfunding 40 minutes from now. And then the X Prize is about giving a a large prize to get people to do some innovative stuff in a field, like starting private space travel. I love the lag here. Okay. So this is a quote from the very famous and kind of a renowned expert in his field, Tracy Jordan from 30 Rock. And it's basically about how the Manatee has become the Mento. And the gist of this is we can all go on to Amazon, and if we've read a book, we can enter a review of the book and say, we think this is really good, or we're amateurs and we're giving our opinion on something, and then our reviews are rated by other people about how good they are. And you can become an expert on rating books. Like, your opinion is becoming an expert opinion on the Amazon site. The same thing happens for recipe sites. I'm not sure which one, I think it's All Recipes. You put in a review of the recipe, people review your review of the recipe, and they actually have it listed where it's the most positive review and the best negative review are down at the bottom, and they're like, this recipe is horrible, but it's written in a really good way, so they get a good rating there. So basically, we have people, you could have like a crappy job, or not a crappy job, you could have a crappy day at work, and go home, and you get on the web, and you are like the expert at sweet potato recipes, and people will be like, oh my gosh, this person said this is great, and I love that person. So this is basically the Manatee becoming the Mento. All right, the next thing, I thought I'd just, okay, so the other thing you can do with crowdsourcing is you can have different contests. You can find, so half of crowdsourcing is having the crowd do a large project, breaking it into small parts and having them do individual parts. The other part is finding that one unique person in a huge crowd who has the solution to a problem. So there's sites like InnoCentive. Businesses come and they have been working on a problem, they can't solve it, and they put it up on the site and offer like $10,000 or $100,000 for someone to solve it. Lots of different people who aren't experts in the field take a look at the problem and they provide solutions. And there's also a site called Topcoder where you have different programmers doing this, the motivation, they get money, but also I think part of the motivation is to solve problems, and the reputation, you get badges and awards for those. Netflix had a contest where they wanted to do a better job of recommending movies you should watch. So they had a $1 million contest, and they put their data out there for people to use, and they ended up with 2 teams that ended up kind of combining, but that were 10% better at recommending what movie you should watch after you finish one movie or based on your profile. Okay, I'm going to cheat because it's taking too long here. Okay, so the other thing that happens with crowdsourcing is sometimes you do it and you don't even know you're doing it. So reCAPTCHA takes a word that it knows what it is, and then it makes it all blurry, and I hate it kind of sometimes because I'll fail 5 times and I'm like, am I human? I'm not sure. And then the other thing they've done is they've taken old books that have been scanned, and there's optical character recognition to try to recognize the words in the books, but some of them they can't recognize. So they make us do it without us knowing it. So the word on the left is one that they know what it is, so they can prove that we're humans, and then the other one is from a book that wasn't recognized. So then if they have 10 or 11 people say it's the same word, then they've translated part of that book. So we're all collectively translating books as we go, as we verify who we are and go into Ticketmaster and all that stuff. All right, so another element is called Amazon Mechanical Turk, and it allows people to break up problems into really small tasks and then just put them on the web for bid. So, but they don't pay a lot. It'll be like 10 cents to do this, or 20 cents or 3 cents. A good example is transcribing audio tape. Let's say you had an audio tape of people talking that was an hour long. You break it up into 5-minute segments, and you put that out on the web, and you put out a bid to translate this first 5 minutes. And you hire 2 different people to do it, and they will do it really quickly, and then you have transcripts of what they've said, and you hire a 3rd person to compare the transcripts of what has been written and see if there's any errors, and then listen to it and make a correction. And what this allows them to do is they can translate a spoken word file in like 6 hours for basically like $12. We'll come back to this. All right, so this is kind of a cool project. It's called Foldit, and it's a video game that you can download and install on your computer. And basically, what it allows you to do is fold proteins. There's all these different proteins, and you can fold them different ways, and they interlock in different ways. And we've had computers try to figure out new drugs by doing the different folding, but what they realized is that humans are much better at doing this. It's like a 20-dimensional Rubik's Cube. And what they do is, there was a team, they were working on something to inhibit HIV in patients, and they'd spent 2 years trying to come up with a protein that would inhibit it, and they had no luck. So they're like, okay, we've heard of this Foldit thing, we'll give it a try. Maybe in a year, some of these gamers will come up with a good idea. Within 10 days, someone had come up with a protein that they'd never seen before that helped stop AIDS. And when they published the paper, they listed 57,000 co-authors for all the people that had contributed. And there's also another game after that called where you get to design RNA. And if your RNA looks really good, they'll actually make the chemical in the lab and bring it to life. There's someone who, by day, works in a shoe store, and at night, she is the best person at making proteins in the world. So now I'm going to switch gears to civic hacking. Now, civic hacking is basically taking city or state data or municipal data and getting a bunch of programmers and designers in a room usually with a lot of Mountain Dew and sugar and pizza for like a weekend, and having them come up with different applications. What can we do with this different data? So the more data you have out there, the more all these amazing people can come up with ideas. So I was part of a team. It was really, Becky Boone did all the great work, and the idea was to take an application from Code for America. Code for America is kind of like Peace Corps for programmers, and they had a contest where they already had programs that they'd written, and they wanted them to be implemented in different cities. So we had like a month to get it implemented, and basically it was called Adopt a Fire Hydrant. Basically you just put in your address, and then it'll show you all the fire hydrants close by your house, and then you adopt it, you name the fire hydrant, and you say, I agree to keep snow off it. Like if there's a lot of snow, I'll just go clear my fire hydrant. Now, AWWU is Alaska Wastewater Waste Utility. They already do this, they already clear the fire hydrants, but by having people adopt it, it allows them extra time to do other stuff. And if there's a fire in your neighborhood, when the fire truck pulls up, it doesn't have to chip ice away from the fire hydrant. So a bunch of people, actually kind of a small team, went together to program this, and then we got a daily news article, and when we launched, 140 people signed up, and we ended up winning a national contest because we had the most people of all the different cities in the United States to take part in it. And you can find it online and adopt a hydrant. I wasn't even going to talk about it because I thought the snow would be gone by the time I gave the talk, but it's still work to be done out there. So here's a picture of Becky with the fire hydrant and our little grand prize winner thing. And then here's a picture of the team. We just took a picture on Wednesday of the team. And while I was there, I was talking to Lance Ahern, who works at Muni. He's the Chief Information Officer. And I was like, what project can I do between now and when I give the talk? This is 3 days ago. Instead of actually working on the talk, why don't I do something else? So the idea was there's a game called Click That Hood, and it has it for Boston and major cities, and it shows you all the neighborhoods in a city and lets you, and then throws a name up, and you have to click on where that neighborhood is on the map. So I was like, well, Anchorage has that data. I talked to Lance, and he told me where it was. Then I sent the data in, and within an hour and a half, they had a first draft up live on the web. So then it had Eagle River and Girdwood. I apologize, I had to take them off because they're so far away that it makes the map too small. But this is out on the web right now. If you go to Click That Hood, you can learn all the Anchorage neighborhood names. All right, So now I'm going to come back to this one. I think is really cool. It's called Legion Scribe. There's this guy out of Rochester who does a lot of crowdsourcing applications for people that are blind or deaf. And what this does is, if you are, let's say you go to a talk like this and you happen to be deaf, you can have your iPhone listen to the talk, or if someone talks to you, and it'll record the speech that's going on, and then it'll send it out to the web, to Amazon Turk, and different people, and it slows down various parts and makes overlapping parts. It breaks it up so that people translate what section they hear into English, and then they send it back to this computer, and it moves it all together in agreement, and then it sends it back to your phone, and you look at the phone, and it'll say in text what that person just said, and it does this all in less than 3 seconds. It's, the application is supposed to come out soon. It was supposed to come out in October, but I mean, it's a real thing. It should be out pretty soon. All right, so what I want you guys to do, the motivation is you can be involved in a community, you can be an expert, you might have the solution to cancer and not know it. I mean, if there's a problem and it's posed in a way, you might be able to make this huge breakthrough and make the community better, make the world better. I want you to go out after this talk. I want you to edit a Wikipedia thing. I want you to get involved in an open source project. I want you to learn how to code. Learning how to code is pretty easy. And actually, there's AnchorageProgramming.com is a new site where women teach other women how to code, and you should check that out. And a lot of the motivations are, I mean, there's money prizes, but it's really like this sense of getting something done. Like you're at your job and you have to wait for Bill to get this thing to you, but you go home and you just take this data and throw it up there, and all of a sudden you have a website out there, and it feels really good. So I encourage everyone to, everyone is the solution to some problem, and I encourage you guys all to do something. This last thing is a 15-year-old high school student. This is the one time I'm going to look at my notes here, which is a card. Whoops. His name's Jack. And he had a friend that had pancreatic cancer that passed away, and so he decided for his science fair he was going to try to come up with a blood test that detects pancreatic cancer more quickly, and he came up with something that's 90% accurate. It's like a little stick using carbon nanotubes. It's 168 times faster, and it's 26,000 times less expensive. And here he is winning a $100,000 prize for it. And this is he's crying, but the excitement and motivation is why you should do this. Thank you very much.